Welcome to this WordStar audio tutorial program from Research Machines.
This 40-minute cassette program will teach you the basics of WordStar, a computer package that allows you to write, edit and file all your paperwork more quickly and accurately than you ever imagined possible.
We'll talk you through the main features of WordStar in a way that will enable you to keep your eyes and hands on the machine. But this cassette doesn't pretend to cover all of WordStar's sophisticated features. Our purpose here is quite simply to get you into word processing as quickly and as painlessly as possible. Once you've worked through our audio instructions, you should have little difficulty with the WordStar user manual. But now let's begin by telling you what you'll learn with this cassette.
First we'll show you how to load WordStar into your Research Machine's computer. Then we'll tell you about writing and editing on the screen and transferring what you've written onto a floppy disk. Once you've filed or stored your text in this way, you'll be able to recall it at any time for further editing.
And once you've got some nicely laid out text, we'll introduce you to the amazing function that enables you to search through your text for a single word and replace it with any other word, and the even more amazing WordStar feature called Block Move, with which you can move any chunk of your text from one part of the document to another.
And when you finally have some nicely corrected and beautifully laid out text, we'll end the program by showing you how to print onto paper what you've been typing into the computer. By now you've realized that you won't get very much out of this audio tutorial unless you're actually sitting in front of an RML380Z computer with its video monitor and keyboard. A printer is very useful because we'd like you to see what your work looks like on paper. But we've recorded this audio course in such a way that you can get practice of WordStar even without using a printer.
To get the most out of this audio tutorial, you'll need to use the equipment for about 1 hour without interruptions. If you do have to stop unexpectedly, it's best if you just press the reset button on the computer and restart later when you can get back to WordStar.
We assume some knowledge of the typewriter keyboard, but don't worry if you aren't a fast typist. One advantage of a tape-recorded course like this is that you can take the information you receive at your own most comfortable speed.
We assume that both your computer and your video monitor are switched on. The identifying signal, COS, and a code beginning with the number 4 should be on the lower left-hand side of the screen. If that's not the case, just stop the cassette for a moment while you check that the monitor and the computer are switched on, and then press the reset button. Someone should have issued you with a working disk. That's one which has the CP/M operating system on it as well as WordStar. You should not, under any circumstances, try to use what we call release copy disks. If the label is handwritten and says something like working copy or training copy, it's likely to be one that you can use to practice with.
It's also important that you know how to handle disks. You should have been shown how to remove disks from their paper covers and how to hold them by the edge with the label. Now, just remove the working disk from its cover and insert it gently but firmly into disk drive A. Do that now.
Now close the door behind the disk and press the letter B on the keyboard. Do that now.
That should have caused the disk drive to spring to life. A small red light on the drive tells you that the computer is reading from a disk or writing to a disk. And you should never attempt to open the drive doors to remove the disk while the light is on. Now, as I was speaking, you should have received a message on the screen that reads something like 56K CP/M, followed by a version number.
Below that, there should be an open arrow, which we call the prompt sign. That's to the right of the letter A, which tells you that you're logged into or working with disk surface A.
For what follows on this cassette, you'll only be working with one disk drive. That is drive A. And the first thing you have to do is to confirm that you're using the right disk, one that contains WordStar. And after that, you have to make sure that you have enough reading and writing space to follow the instructions we'll be giving you. But first you want a list of all the information that is stored on the disk in drive A. The way you do that is by typing the letters DIR for directory. Just type DIR. Do that now.
Nothing much will happen until you've checked that you type DIR correctly. If you made a mistake, you can use the useful delete key, which you'll find on the right-hand side of the keyboard. It's marked with the letters DELT. Whenever you make a mistake as you type, the delete key lets you go back and retype. So much easier than correcting when you use a conventional typewriter.
But now we'll assume that you've typed DIR perfectly. So you should press the return key on the right-hand side of your keyboard. You'll find that return acts like the carriage return key on a conventional typewriter. So just press return once. Do that now.
This will have caused your disk drive to whir again. Then, almost immediately, a list of what's contained on your disk will have appeared on the screen. If the list includes the initials WS, it means that the WordStar program is present. If it's not there, get help.
In case you're a bit puzzled by the letters before and after the file names, we'd better point out that the prefix A represents the disk surface that is being used.
The letters after the file names tell you what sort of files you've got. So com means it's a command file which makes the system do things, while txt is a text file containing a document that can be called onto the screen for editing. But as we said before, there's one more thing to do before you start writing with WordStar, and that's to make sure you have enough empty writing space on the disk to carry out the instructions that follow. We assume that you're looking at the letter A, followed by the prompt sign. Simply type the letters STAT and press return. That's stat return. Do that now.
After some disk activity, some new characters will appear. The word space will be followed by a number and the letter K. K stands for thousands of characters available. For example, 20K tells you that there are 20,000 characters of writing space available to you. For the purpose of this audio tutorial, you'll need about that many characters. If the number available on sideA is much less than that, get help.
And now, just a word about how you can best follow what we tell you on the rest of this cassette. By now, you'll have noticed that we have our own special way of giving instructions. First, we describe what you should do next. You should listen while we do that. Then we say, do that now, followed by a short pause.
Carry out the instructions during that pause, not before. That way you'll be sure that you heard everything. The pause will usually be long enough for you to carry out the action described, but don't worry if you get behind occasionally. You can always stop the cassette until you've caught up.
Once in a while, you'll be asked to stop the tape while you carry out a longer exercise. The signal to stop our commentary sounds like this. It's also useful if you have some text of your own to copy from. If you have a magazine or newspaper to hand, you won't always have to invent the text you type while you're learning how the system works.
But now it's time for us to get into WordStar. Just type the letters WS next to the prompt sign and press return. Do that now.
That should have caused the disk drive to come to life. First, you'll get a screen of MicroPro copyright information. Then, after about 15 seconds, you'll be welcomed by the so-called No File menu.
It's called a menu because it offers you a selection of word processing options to choose from. The very top of the menu reads Editing No File, because you've not yet started working on any document. Stop the tape for a few moments if you want to have a good look at it.
Whenever you write anything by computer, the system expects you to open a file. That's a space in the system's memory that can then be transferred to a magnetic disk or floppy disk for storage and retrieval. All your letters, timetables, reports and other written work will be stored by the computer under different names, just like in a conventional filing cabinet. And WordStar expects you to open your files before you start writing anything. You should now create a document file by typing the letter D. Just type D. Do that now.
After a bit more activity in the drive, the system will ask you for a file name. And what you type next will determine whether WordStar calls up an existing file or creates a new file. You want to create a new file, and so that you'll have no trouble identifying it later among all the other files in the directory listing, you can name it after yourself. So if your name is Mary, you can call it Mary, or if you're John, you can call your file John. And include a number in your file name. In the course of the next half hour, you may create 3 or 4 different files, and it's best if you know which of your files is which. So the file name on your first WordStar document could be Mary1 or John1. If yours is a very long name, then shorten it, since file names are limited to a maximum of 8 characters. But leave no space between the end of your name and the number.
Only please don't press the return key until we ask you to, And just check that you use the number 1 from the top row of the keyboard. The computer doesn't like it when you use an alphabet O instead of a 0 or a lowercase l instead of the number 1. Now enter your file name, number 1 without a space and without pressing return. Do that now. Once you've entered your file name, you should enter an extension or file type to identify the kind of file that you're creating. You're not obliged to do this, but it's a very useful habit to get into, because later on it's likely that your disks will contain files of different types. You're writing text, so your extension should be TXT.
The way you enter the extension or file type is by typing a full stop after your file name, followed by the letters TXT. And it doesn't matter to the computer whether you type all this in upper or lower case letters. Just type a full stop, TXT, and press return. Do that now.
That will cause more whirring to come from the black box. On the screen, you'll see that the computer is treating this as a new file. A few seconds later, you'll find yourself looking at the so-called main menu.
Let's just take a few moments to understand what it says on the main menu. Very soon you'll understand just how easy it is to use WordStar, thanks to the useful guidance of the menus and help screens. The system is really self-prompting. All you have to do is understand what the prompts mean.
Looking at the top line, you're informed that you're working with disk drive A. After the colon, you can read your file name and file type, and a page number, which as you're just starting should be number 1.
Next comes the line number, which tells you exactly where you are in relation to the top and bottom of that page. This is a particularly useful feature in electronic word processing, since a standard A4 page can be up to 55 lines long, whereas your video monitor will rarely let you see more than 12 or 14 lines at a time. That, combined with the upward scrolling movement after every line you type, means that you could very easily lose your sense of just where you are on the page.
Then, next to the line number, you can read your column number. This gives you information about your location on the line. You'll find it very useful when you start setting tabs and when you're laying out or formatting your text on the screen. WordStar allows you to format on your monitor.
Now, the very first skill you need to use WordStar is the ability to move the cursor around the screen. You probably know that the cursor is that little bright rectangle that acts as a pointer to tell you just where the next character you type on the screen will appear. Think of it as an electronic finger that points at where you are on the electronic page.
Your success with word processing, and indeed with many other computer functions, will depend on how good you are at controlling the cursor.
Let's just explore how the cursor works. The first thing to do is to put some text on the screen. Just spend a few minutes typing 10 or 20 lines. You might like to practice writing your full name, address, and telephone number, along with anything else that comes into your head. What matters now is not what you type, but that you get a screen full of text to play with. If you get carried away and type, say, 55 lines, you may come to a dotted line. And that indicates that you've finished one page and are about to start another. You might just notice that the page indicator on the top of the screen tells you when you change pages.
And don't let it worry you if you make mistakes as you type. We'll show you how to make corrections, deletions and insertions when you've typed your first chunk of text. Use the return key whenever you want to start a new line. As we said, it acts just like a typewriter's carriage return. You can press return after your name and before you start typing your house number and street name, and press return again before you start the line that contains your town, county and postal code. But you should also discover what happens when you don't use the return key. You'll find that whenever you type long sentences, you don't have to worry about when to press return, thanks to WordStar's word wrap facility. Stop the cassette until you've typed some material. When you come back, we'll show you how to correct, delete and insert text.
Now we'll assume that you have several lines of text to play with, and your text should look quite neat. Did you happen to notice how, whenever you approached the right-hand margin, the cursor took any incomplete words down a line? You then have complete, unbroken words on the right margin. And you may have found typing by computer more fun than doing the same job with a conventional typewriter.
Now read the cursor movement instructions at the top of the screen. Whenever you see an upward-pointing arrow, it means that you should hold down the Control key, which you'll find on the top left-hand corner of the keyboard.
And while holding down the Control key, you should press the letter that appears next to the arrow. If, for example, you hold down Control and press the letter E, the cursor moves up a line, while if you hold down Control and press X, the cursor moves down a line.
We'd like you to spend a little time playing with the cursor. We'll no longer say the full hold down Control and press X.
From now on, we'll simply say Control X, and you'll know that we mean the same thing.
Try Control S, first once and then several times. You won't have to let go of Control while you press S. Do that now.
Next, try Control A, first once and then several times. Do that now.
Did you notice how Control S makes the cursor jump back one space at a time, while Control A moved the cursor back a whole word at a time? Now try Control D and Control F, first once and then several times. Do that now.
Once again, the cursor will have moved first one space and then one word at a time, but in the opposite direction. This time, try Control E and Control X. Do that now.
Did you notice any logic to the way those 6 keys are laid out? You'll see that those 6 keys, E, X, S, D, F and A, were not chosen in an arbitrary way. If you look at them, you'll notice that they form a sort of diamond-shaped cluster. Each letter points in the direction that it moves the cursor. So A and S move the cursor to the left, while D and F move it to the right, E moves the cursor up, and X moves it down.
What you should do now is to stop the cassette for a few minutes while you move the cursor around the electronic page. Then, when you come back, we'll show you how easy it is to correct typing errors with WordStar.
By now, you're feeling pretty confident about moving the cursor. That means that you're ready to start editing your text.
Earlier, we told you how to use the Delete key to erase any mistakes you make as you type. Now that you can move the cursor about, you can travel to any part of your document. Then you can insert, delete, and change anything you like. And there's no need to retype anything you typed correctly the first time around. However, we must tell you that deleting feels strange at first. That's mainly because WordStar treats the spaces between words like typed characters. You delete gaps in the text or between blocks of text in exactly the same way as you delete visible letters and numbers.
Now there's just the possibility that you're a virtuoso of the keyboard who made absolutely no mistakes at all. If that's the case, we'll just ask you to delete and retype as if you'd made mistakes.
Look under the Delete heading at the top of the screen and notice that Control G deletes one character, the one that is under the cursor. If you go on pushing G while holding down Control, you'll find that you can delete forwards, whereas the Delete key deletes backwards.
The principle is that when you're actually typing, you want to go backwards over mistakes that you make as you type, whereas when you're editing, you'll tend to delete and make changes from the top and edit forward through your text. One of the most valuable commands is Control G, which enables you to delete forwards. Take a few moments to experiment with Control G. First, move the cursor into the middle of your text and compare Control G and the Delete key. Control G gobbles up unwanted letters and words, while the Delete key goes back over unwanted text.
When you delete a letter under the cursor by using Control G, you must not move the cursor away to retype. You just type at the cursor position and let the cursor push the other words to the right.
Don't worry if your corrections and insertions destroy your neatly formed rows. In a few moments, we'll show you how to straighten out your revised paragraphs.
Control T gets rid of unwanted words, and Control Y kills a whole line. Occasionally, you'll get some unexpected disk activity while you insert and delete. This is nothing to worry about.
We didn't explain the meaning of the Insert On notice at the top right-hand corner of your screen. The reason is that this is a powerful editing feature that only comes into its own now that you're ready to make corrections. It means that you can insert a word, a sentence, or 2 pages into the body of your text without destroying any of your previous work. All you do is add your new text. Then, when you've finished, take the cursor back to the beginning of the paragraph you edited.
Stop the tape for a few minutes while you delete, correct, and insert words into your text. Don't be afraid to insert 1 or more new sentences into the body of your text, and don't be concerned if the format of your screen is spoilt. When you switch on again, we'll show you how to make it all look lovely.
You should now have a rather disordered-looking screen of edited text. Look at the section of the command panel under the heading Miscellaneous. You'll notice a command called Reform, which is obtained by pressing Ctrl B.
When the cursor is on the first character of a paragraph, Ctrl B reforms the words of that paragraph so that the text looks as neat as the rest of your document. Sometimes, however, the reconstruction of your paragraph may suddenly stop as WordStar meets a word that does not fit into the current line.
The system then attempts to put in a hyphen, but waits until you tell it whether it's chosen the right place to hyphenate. There's a procedure for changing the hyphens that the machine chooses for you, and you can learn it later. For now, it's best if you just press Ctrl B a second time. Then the whole word in which the cursor stopped will simply jump down to the next line.
So stop the tape again for a few minutes while you reform your paragraphs. But return the cursor to the first letter of any paragraph that you want to reform, and use Ctrl B. When you switch on again, we'll show you how to save your text on disk. Then we'll go on to write a short, standard letter.
This is the end of side 1 of this audio tutorial. Please turn the cassette over to continue with WordStar.